Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and log in. We are so glad that you are here on this beautiful, wet Sunday morning. It's still beautiful. It's going to bring the heat down. It's going to be wonderful. We come together by the light of our chalice flame. And if you're joining us from home, we invite you to light a candle or chalice with us. And I also just want to welcome Reverend Hannah Roberts-Villeneuve. She is our new assistant minister, and I have her doing hard work this morning. We light this flame as a symbol of new life, enlightening our way, as a symbol of the warmth in every human heart. Let the lighting of this flame rekindle in us the inner light of hope, of peace, of love. May we share that light with all people.
Good morning. Good morning. Like Reverend Christina said, I'm the Reverend Hannah Roberts-Villeneuve, and I'm your new assistant minister here at the fellowship. I am grateful for this rainy Sunday together, my first of many here with you all. I'm grateful for the warm welcome we've received from so many folks here at the fellowship so far, and for the opportunity to meet more and more of you as well. You can also say hello to my wife Catherine and our children Ada and Benjamin, who are joining us here this morning. I grew up in Racine, Wisconsin, but moved here from Cheyenne, Wyoming, so I am readjusting to the humidity. If this is your first time visiting the fellowship, I want to extend you a special welcome, and I'm grateful that we could share our first Sundays here together. We would love to help you get connected here, or perhaps you can help me get connected here. You can talk with any of our staff after service, or you can send us an email. And a little housekeeping note, today is a question box service. So Reverend Christina is going to answer your questions. Give her hard ones. Be sure to have your questions in by the first verse that we sing of We Laugh, We Cry. You can see where that is in your order of service. I think the actual little question writing papers, etc., are out in the foyer. It's time now to settle in. Take a deep breath. And wherever you are, become aware of your body. Allow yourself to be fully present to this time together. We are glad that you're here. Our call to gather this morning is entitled Ask and Receive, written by our own Reverend Christina Leone Tracy, and when I do the universal minister hand sign for your turn, your response will be, ask and ye shall receive. So let's practice. Ask and ye shall receive. Marvelous. Ask a question and ye shall receive what? An answer. Perhaps, some piece of knowledge to store away in the corners of your mind. Ask, and ye shall receive. Ask a question, and what do you get? An opinion, a fact, a thought, a conversation. You get a connection with someone else. Ask, and ye shall receive. Ask a question, and you get the pleasure of asking. That momentary humility of not knowing, of living in a miraculous world where there is an infinite amount that we do not know. Ask, and ye shall receive. Ask a question and continue your journey, moving forward in the world without fear, knowing that it is good to ask, good to find out, good to keep learning. Ask, and ye shall receive. Ask and ye shall receive an open heart, a curious mind, and a hopeful spirit, ready to receive the world.
Today, we are exploring what it means to ask questions and perhaps to receive an answer. Asking and answering are both practices in generosity, sharing knowledge, opinion, curiosity, and connection. Another way we practice generosity is with our resources of time, energy, and of course, money. If you are ever in need of emotional, spiritual, or financial support, we are here for you. Please don't hesitate to reach out to our ministers. It is a joy for them to be able to offer help. And if you are one who is feeling stable and able to give, we ask that you do so in that spirit of generosity. There are so many ways to give to the fellowship. You can give of your time and talent, and we especially need financial resources to allow our ministries to thrive for the months and years to come. If you are here in our building, feel free to come up to one of our ushers who is standing at the back of the sanctuary, or you can raise your hand to have an usher come to you. For everyone else, we encourage you to donate online or via our text to give function on a smartphone. Thank you. Your gifts are deeply and always appreciated.
We share with each other from our hearts as an act of compassion, as an act of widening our circle of care beyond our own individual lives. To be held in community is a deeply powerful gift, and we invite you to let us know whenever you need to be held in this fellowship's embrace. You can reach out to any of us on the staff, or you can fill out the Joys and Concerns form on our website. The options of sharing privately with a minister, asking for support from our care team, or sharing more widely with our community are all available to you. When we share our lives with each other, we allow our joys to feel multiplied and our sorrows divided. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can type into the chat box whatever joy, concern, prayer request, or intention might be on your heart or on your mind. We now turn our attention to the joys and concerns wider than those of this gathered community. We allow our mind and heart to reach out in ever-widening circles like the ripples in water. Our first stone that we add to our water is for our local community and the state of Wisconsin. We honor our local primary election, which takes place this coming week, and acknowledge our UU commitment to democracy and our gratitude for our public officials and those who work the polls to make possible our right to vote. I see you, Mary. We add our next stone for the United States. We lift up the laws regarding abortion access that are creating battles across the nation, notably recently in Kentucky and Indiana. We affirm the Unitarian Universalist values that support safe access to reproductive care, including abortion care. And as the ripples continue, we recognize our interconnectedness across borders and oceans as we add another stone in remembrance of Gerald Nagler, the human rights activist and founder of Civil Rights Defenders, an international human rights organization who died this past week at the age of 92. We enfold all who are celebrating and all who are suffering in the embrace of our hearts, and we commit ourselves to acts of compassion and justice in service to those circles beyond our own. May this moment of silence help to make it so. Do the bell.
Before we sing, I just wanted to remind you that if you still wanted to write a question for the question boxes, then you can step out. The cards and the pencils are out there. I won't be offended if you walk away while I'm playing. So we're going to start with the first verse of We Laugh, We Cry. The lyrics are up there. It's also 354 in the Great Hymnal. Please stand if you like.
We laugh, we cry, we live, we die, we muse, we sing our song. We need to feel there's something here to which we can belong. We need to feel the freedom just to have some time alone. But most of all, we need close friends we can call our very own. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found a need to be together. We have our hearts to give. We have our thoughts to receive. And we believe that sharing is the dance.
Our reading this morning is from the Austrian poet Rainer Maria Rilke. Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer.
And now please join in the second verse of We Laugh, We Cry.
A child is born among us, and we feel a special glow. We see time's endless journey as we watch the baby grow. We thrill to hear imagination freely run. But dedicate our minds and hearts to the spirit of this child, and we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found the time to live together, and in the grace of age we share the wonder of youth, and we believe that growing is in us.
A reflection on quests, questions, and moments of illumination. Perhaps the question box should join forces with the answer circle. I think of that box of questions as a tool we may use to develop deeper appreciation of life's mysteries and its energy and power. A box that assists us developing our focus within limitations while lifting our wings with the winds of inspiration and hope. The answer circle may perhaps help us remain more centered in the present moment and attentive to our spiritual and social horizons, attending to earth, sky, four directions, stars, moon, and sun. I approached my prior calling as a psychologist as an opportunity to open rich dialogues on the journey of life as it occurs and its sacredness, spirituality, and healthiness. While religions may provide answers, spirituality is where answers mingle with questions, where pain and healing and learning are never finished, where the base is not just in the religion, but in the spiritual underpinnings of each day. A day in a life, in a time, in a place. The psychologist Ken Pargament has done in-depth research on how certain religious beliefs that increase guilt may increase psychological distress, while those who have a collaborative faith report greater well-being. In his work, he finds three pillars of religion and health: capacities for empathy, balance of self and others, and constancy and change in balance. Thus, we should share inspirations and pilgrimages, open powerful experiences each day of nature, harmony, and connection, and draw upon music, art, collaboration, and teamwork. And keep a sacred box of mysteries, inspirations, melodies, and grounding throughout our days and all around the circle of our horizon and the earth and our sky. Empathy. Empathy is a gentle wind that moves the waves of emotions among people and helps us find correct paths and commitments in our communities. May it be so.
Please join me in the third verse of We Laugh, We Cry.
are full of wonder, and our time is very brief. The death of one among us fills us all with pain and grief. But as we live, so shall we die, and when our lives are done, the memories we shared with friends, they will linger always. And we believe in love and in the saints above, and we have found a place to be together. We have the right to grow. We have the gift to believe that peace within our living is advanced.
All right, friends. I've been doing this every year now, and you're getting harder. I was out there looking at the cards. I said, these are hard. Just as a note, Reverend Hannah will be doing the same thing next week. So feel free to ask the same questions, see if she answers them differently or not. It's a great way to get to know her. All right, our first question. How old are you? Do you have any kids? So despite what I look like, I'm actually 40 years old. Yay, I know, wow. Which I realize, to some in this room is young. But I think a lot of people think I'm in my 20s, I said that to a man on an airplane once. I said, I know I look like I'm in my 20s. He said, I would have said 30. Thanks. I did not get carded last night at a Mile of Music event, and I was very offended. I said, do you need my ID? He was like, no. All right, so I do. I have two children, Nevin, who is 6.5, and going on 16, and Ellis, who is 3.5, and has recently read the manual on how to be a 3-year-old, and is just pushing every boundary, every single one. His favorite thing to do is say no, and then he goes, like that. So I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they're wonderful. Speaking of children, this question is, will we have the Wonderbox again? So we stopped with the Wonderbox in our Time for All Ages. We have done it a couple times this year, but we haven't had our children explicitly in this space with us because of the inability for a lot of our kids to be vaccinated. But now that that is possible, that even our youngest kids can be vaccinated, starting when the program year starts again and we go back to 2 services, we will have our children welcomed in the beginning part of our service, and we'll have a Time for All Ages. Although the worship staff is playing around with the idea of our first service being a little bit more introspective, personal sharing, maybe congregational response, and our second service being a little bit more kind of forward-facing with a Wonderbox and the children, because our RE will be at the second service. So, so we're playing around with the idea of having two options for people to choose from. So I hope that answers that question. Can we make the Cardinal an honorary member? Or perhaps a minister? I would say the Cardinal is already a minister. I have to compete with him a lot. But yeah, he can be an honorary member. Anyone want to make him a name tag? I also think our ducks in the pond should be at least greeters, right? What drew you the most to our fellowship? It's a great question. So it's been 5 years since I was in search for a new ministry. And when you're in search, you read a lot of information about a lot of different congregations. And one of the pieces of advice I was given by a colleague and good friend was to look for the congregation with the problem that you're not afraid of. Because every congregation is going to have some issue that they're working on. The thing I loved about this fellowship was that the problem you all were working on was not about trust or drama. There was none of that going on in this congregation. There was already a really established sense of love and care and trust for each other and trust for your ministry. And I liked that I wasn't going to have to come in and fight that uphill battle. The issue that was most keenly aware of was finances, that this congregation still struggles with. But I wasn't afraid of that problem, so we're still working on it together. But the thing that drew me to the congregation was the sense that you all take religious community seriously, that this thing that we do together on Sunday morning and throughout the week and out in the world, the fact that you show up when there's something going on in the community. I was at Houdini Plaza 2 nights ago for a Mila Music event, and I looked around and realized I'm sure there were lots of fellowship members at various Mile events, but I didn't see a lot of you at Houdini Plaza. And I thought, well, that's very different. Usually when I'm at Houdini Plaza, it's for some sort of social justice event, and you're all there. So I love that about you. I also liked that you didn't take yourselves too seriously. Some congregations just really think highly of themselves, and that's lovely, but it can also be challenging, and I wanted to have fun. I wanted to have fun with you all. And I think we have done that, and I think we can still do that together. So that's what drew me here, is the balance of taking ourselves seriously but not too seriously. How do you find meaning of life in a very uncertain and confusing world? I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I don't really. That's the beauty of the question box. I don't have to have all the answers. And bonus points, you can disagree with me. You don't have to agree with my answers. That's fine. Not only today, but anytime. We have something in our congregational polity that we call freedom of the pulpit and freedom of the pew, which means that you cannot compel me to say certain things from this pulpit, but I cannot compel you to agree with me, and you can say so. So that's part of our tradition. But I don't really know the answer to how you find meaning in this really complicated and confusing world, except that I would say I don't try to find meaning as much as make meaning. I don't think meaning is laying around somewhere waiting for us to stumble upon it. I think it's something we have to do and work together on. The 2 pieces I think are the most important in the confusing part is that we do it together, that's the benefit of a community. In a world that is increasingly isolated, increasingly individualistic, increasingly focused on our own preferences, community is a sacred and rare thing. And I think the fact that we come together to do this work where we have these questions and we don't know the answers and we wonder together and we challenge each other and we comfort each other, that is key. That is key. The other half of that question of how do we make meaning in a confusing world, and certain and confusing world, is that I think as Unitarian Universalists, our theology has something really beautiful to say about uncertainty, which is that it's not a bad thing. In so many traditions, certainty is the goal. Eliminating doubt is the goal. Having faith, which means putting on blinders and believing in spite of all evidence, is the goal. Here, that is not the goal. And it's not just, I say this a lot, but it's not just that we don't know the answer. And a lot of people will say that when they're describing Unitarian Universalism to their friends. I love this place. It's so great because you don't have to have the answers. It's okay. You can believe whatever you want. Don't say that. Please don't say you can believe whatever you want. But I think it's not just that we can believe whatever we want and we're real wishy-washy. It's that we actually have a theological stance of wonder, of curiosity. That's a whole position that we approach the world from. And for me, that gives me strength, and I'm less likely to be knocked over by the uncertainty of the world because I'm starting from a theological stance of wonder. So something's going on in the world, something chaotic and hard, and my first instinct is to feel knocked over by that. And my next instinct, when I draw upon my faith as a Unitarian Universalist, is to say, this is where I am, this is where we are most ourselves, is in this uncertain place, right? I recently got a new tattoo, a couple of them, and this little bitty one right here on my wrist says, "All will be well." And it comes from the 14th or 15th century mystic, Julian of Norwich. And she said, "All will be well, and all will be well, and all manner of things will be well." And if you're looking at the short term, she is wrong, right? But if you're looking at the cosmic state or the God's eye view, then I believe that she's right, and I have to believe that. In the meantime, we have work to do, and we do it together, and that's that first part of that answer. So, drawing sacred strength and courage from the position of not knowing, and then doing the work together. That's how I would do that. Can we discuss UU for atheists? No, just kidding. Of course we can. Yeah, I think, so Unitarian Universalism, for those of you that are newish, is a non-creedal tradition, which means we don't have a creed, we don't all agree on the things that we're supposed to believe in our minds, which means that in this room, there are folks who believe in a god or gods or goddesses, or a higher power of some kind, or who would attribute the universe or nature with some sort of sacred power. And then there are those who don't, who would identify as atheist. One thing I like to sort of get out in the open is that when we name theological categories, I like to name them as I believe statements. People often name atheism as I don't believe in God. But here's how I would name each of these. Theism is I believe in a God or gods. Polytheism is I believe in gods. Atheism is I believe there is no God. So that's an actual belief statement. It's not that I don't believe in it. It's I believe that there is no God. Agnosticism is I believe that the knowledge of God, or whether God exists, is unknowable. So it's not I don't know if God exists. It's I believe that God is unknowable. So those belief statements, I think, are helpful to sort of figure out where we sit in those categories. And it's okay to sit in those categories at different times and different places in your life. If you ask me today, I might say I'm an agnostic. If you ask me tomorrow, I might say I'm an atheist. If you ask me yesterday, I might have said I was a theist. That's okay. I'm a religious pragmatist, which means whatever is useful is the correct religious path. If your religious path, if your answer to that question of what do you believe is helpful to you, if it is guiding you in your life, it is making you more connected to the world, less fearful, more helpful, more loving, good religious path, I give that a rubber stamp of yes. Whether it is an atheist path, a theist path, a pagan path, any of those paths. If it is making you scared, worried, divisive, hateful, isolated, it is not a useful path. And I would encourage you to talk to me or Reverend Hannah and think about your path. But Unitarian Universalism is very influenced. Our history was very, very heavily influenced, especially in the early to mid part of the 1900s by humanism, which is a religious way of sort of understanding atheism. It's a belief in human power instead of supernatural power. And the Humanist Manifesto that was written in the early 1900s was, the original one, was signed almost exclusively by Unitarian and Universalist clergy. So Unitarian Universalism is very comfortable with atheism as a religious path. I like to use the phrase religious humanism or religious naturalism, which is sometimes a slightly different version. Humanism is focused on human power. Naturalism is a focus on sort of turning to the natural world for the same thing you might turn to religion for. But these paths don't rely on there being a God. They rely on science, nature, human nature, instead of prayer or supernatural intervention or something like that. Is there anything else about atheism that you want to know? Did I answer your question? Okay. Yeah, we try to talk about lots of different paths here, and sometimes we use God language. Sometimes we'll talk about God. I almost never, if you actually make sure your ears stay open after you hear the word God, I almost never will use the word God without then explaining what I mean. So if you believe in God or nature or the universe or, I'll give you a couple other options. So I just encourage you to keep listening and find where you fit the best. And also that to turn on your UU translators, like Google Translate, that when you hear religious language that you're like, I don't know about that, turn on your religious translator and imagine that there's another way that you could say that. One of the sermon series that I want to do this year is on God metaphors, different ways that we can imagine God language. Because I taught a UU theology class last year. Who here was in that class? Penny was, a few, yep, Mike was. Yep. We had a lot of fun together doing lots of UU theology stuff, but I noticed that anytime we started thinking about the idea of God as a concept that didn't need to be accepted or rejected, which is often how we think of the concept of God. We think of it as, like, I know what that is, and I'm either going to believe it or reject it. When we started playing around with the idea of God as something that could be different than what we imagined it originally to be, we all had a lot more fun. And we got really excited about all these options. And so I want to do that with all of you this year, which means that you might learn to like the word God a little more, even if you don't believe in God, even if you're an atheist. Do you think the fellowship is ready to become co-conspirators in the fight for racial justice? And this quote, Alicia Garza, activist and co-founder of the Black Lives Matter movement, described that co-conspirators are people who are actively fighting against the system of white supremacy, and in particular, the benefits they receive from it. And then this next question is, how do we heal from the pain of losing Reverend Leah and her family, in part due to the racism in the Fox Valley? So those questions, I think, go hand in hand. And I'm going to say that I think we are on the path to being ready to be co-conspirators. I think we have done a lot of work in the last 5 years as a congregation around questions of white supremacy culture. And when you hear me use that phrase, that means the water that we're swimming in, the culture that lifts up whiteness and white culture as sort of the norm or the best. It does not mean that I believe that any one individual in this room is a white supremacist. But I do think that we are starting to uncover that water that we swim in. We're starting to realize it. Our board has been doing a lot of work around what are our practices and policies and things that sort of uphold white supremacy culture. I think until we all, and I include myself in this, are ready to radically change ourselves in order to be fully welcoming to people of color, people of different cultures in this space, we will not truly be co-conspirators. And I saw something online a while ago, and it said something about, inclusivity is welcoming people in, but true allyship is being willing to change who we are. So this idea that like, we're so wonderful and welcoming and open-minded, why aren't there more people of color here? Well, that alone should just tell us something. That's the answer. And it doesn't mean that we're doing anything inherently wrong. It just means that we're not as welcoming and open as we think we are. So we have to be willing to examine that and change things, even if they're not the thing we love the most, if we actually want to be co-conspirators in racial justice. It happened that people in a raft are starving and pick a short straw of who to eat. Are you the eater or the feeder? Thanks, Tom Pennenberg. I'm just gonna say, they can eat me. I cannot. I just would not be able to do it. That's all. That's my answer. You're gonna take that home today. 2 questions after 5 years with us. What's your greatest accomplishment and what's your biggest disappointment? These are great questions. There's a lot of answers to both of those questions. I would say my greatest accomplishment that I can see as I look out into this room is, and I know Reverend Hannah is having this experience today where she's been in this other congregation for 5 years, and you get to know people. And when they come in the room and you say, "Good morning, how's your husband?" or what's going on with that leak in your bathroom? Or, she doesn't know you yet. And that's not her fault, she's new. She doesn't have ESP. I remember that feeling the first day or two, second week or something. I was standing out greeting people, hoping to God they had their name tags on so that I could say their names, and realizing, like, shoot, I don't know you. And I tried really hard, and I arrived to a very large congregation and had to suddenly know you. And you were used to a minister who already knew you. And you were used to a minister who had 25 years to get to know you. And so that I was off on the wrong foot. I mean, it was hard. But I worked really hard to get to know you. And I'm still doing that. And if you feel like you don't know me and you want me to get to know you more, shoot me an email and I'd love to have lunch with you. But that, I would say, feels like an accomplishment, getting to know you and care about you and know your children and know whose parent has recently been moved to a nursing home or something like that. Those things are important to me. My biggest disappointment, I think after my medical leave, which I just came back from after 2 months away, I realized that I have not done a good job of modeling what true ministry looks like. Ministry is not a series of tasks that need to be done. And I'm really good at doing series of tasks. And so what I did was, I think in my effort to try to show you all that I could be a really good minister, I did lots of tasks, lots and lots of them. And I realized that that's not actually the goal of good ministry. The goal of good ministry is to spend time thinking and reading and being able to lead you and guide you and meet with you and do all of those things. It's not about how many things I can check off in a day. And so I want to shift my own self in doing that, and I want to bring you along in that work too, of doing collective good ministry together, if that makes sense. All right, we're almost out of time, so I'm going to do the last one here. How do you define pro-choice? I believe we're talking about the reproductive sense of that word, which is under attack right now in our country. Pro-choice is the belief that any person who can become pregnant, and it's not always women, just as a reminder, trans people, trans men, non-binary folks can also become pregnant, so I try not to use woman-only language, that any person who can become pregnant has the complete autonomy to be able to do that or not do that as they so desire. So that includes reproductive options, IVF, assisted fertility, surrogacy, adoption, foster care as a need if they decide that they or are unable to care for the child that they've born. It involves true support from the society to give those options and choices. It's not just whether or not to have an abortion, although that is a big part of it. If you want to give birth, it's almost a year of your life in a very difficult and dangerous state. And people should have access to health care. They should have access to support. They should have access to time off from work, child care. All of those things make our society more able to be pro-choice, and I would say pro-life. That to be pro-choice is to be for life, for the life of the person who can become pregnant, for the life of the family, for the life of the children that person already has, and for the life of that growing fetus who might be or might not be born. But that life is not birth. Life is the all-encompassing nature of who we are. And we as Unitarian Universalists have a long history of advocating for choice. The First Unitarian Church of Dallas was involved in the amicus brief in Roe versus Wade. And I know members of our congregation were involved in underground networks to support abortion before Roe versus Wade. And I know that you are pissed that you're having to do this again. And I will join you in making abortion access and choice possible for anyone who needs it. I have about 20 more questions. I will answer them in other ways. Thank you for your questions, and I love doing these. These are so much fun.
And we'll finish with the fourth verse of We Laugh, We Cry, where the final sentence is the title of our service today. We seek elusive answers to the questions of this life. We seek to put an end to all the waste of human strife. We search
time together is coming to a close, which means our time of returning to the world and our daily lives is beginning. Remember that there are always ways to get connected here at the fellowship, to meet new people, try new things, live your values out loud. Be sure to read the weekly scroll e-newsletter, or let us know if you want to be added to that mailing list. Check the order of service for some things that are coming up. And we invite you now to consider something from today's service that you want to carry with you away from this gathering and into your week. Maybe it was a question, an answer, a topic, a song, or something else. It's our hope that that will stay with you to provide inspiration and empowerment until we're together again. And now we extinguish our chalice as we continue to hold its warmth and light in our hearts. Please join me in unison words. As we extinguish this flame, let us go our ways with hope in our hearts, with our spirits renewed, and with a deeper understanding of life's mystery. Let us carry the light of compassion and commitment to build a better world. Before we go, please join us for coffee hour, goodies, cake, and celebration to welcome Reverend Hannah and her beautiful family. And stick around to talk to Hannah, and we also have some gifts. You all were very generous to give to them. Go in questions and in connection. Go in peace, knowing that we wait to embrace you upon your return.